everybody. I'm Jim Rhodes, Artist Relations for Radial on Record. And today I'm joined by our good friend, engineer, musician, multi-award winner, Butch Walker. Butch, buddy, it's good to see you. How are you?
Good to see you, man. Just holding it down over here in Central Time Zone,
Yeah,
rural Tennessee.
rural Tennessee. So you're in, you're in the Tennessee area. I saw your photos when we were back and forth, just working out the Primacoustic stuff. Your new studio there looks fantastic. How's things coming along? Are you done the construction phase and all
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm working. I I,
that?
I finished it. It was pretty much dialed in by the end of the year, and and then of course it just had to be uh, up to the industry to get back to work when it felt safe enough to do so. So that all started like clockwork in January, and I've been very busy ever since, which is good. So, but it's
That's
great.
good.
Yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, thanks for the support. I know, yeah, and you've been a member of the Radial Prime Acoustic family for a long time. We appreciate the support. Means a
Big
lot to
big fan
us.
of the
And
products, man.
thank you, buddy. The Prima stuff, I noticed with the photos you sent, beautiful vaulted ceiling. You've got like the 48 by 40, like the 4 foot by 4 foot panels up there, and
Hmm.
some of the smaller 2 foot by 4 foot panels and some clouds and stuff. Prima stuff working out well for you?
It's great.
Doing
I
what you
mean,
need?
I've been using Primacoustic for years, for probably 15 years, I would say, because I did my first LA studio in all Primacoustic stuff after I moved out there the first time, um, and then after that, just did I did my new studio in it out there. That was like, I'd say new. It was like that's 6 years ago, and that's my studio on the West Coast that I still use all the time when I go out there. And then when I built this one, it was sort of like, okay, I've got a lot more space, so it's going to be a little bit bigger job. But man, it's been great. It's a big. It was the barn for the horses here, and so I ended up gutting it and making it all one big kind of vaulted room, kind of church vibe, stained glass, arched ceilings and glass, and maybe you can show some pictures of it or whatever. But it's we basically wanted it to. I wanted it to be open. And I'm a big fan of ambience, but controlled ambience. I don't like it to be too much decay and too much tail on the reverbs, on the ambience and everything. So um, I did it all in rough sawn oak, and so it's very
Nice.
porous, and that's great because it acts as almost like a reflective or an absorbent surface almost. And it's a lot less reflected. So
Gotcha.
the only parts that are reflective are the shiplap pine ceilings painted white, the arches,
Nice.
and I did those with the white paintable panels that are already white, and I mean they just kind of go away. You don't even see them. And then I did brown ones in the corners, and I did. And then I did a white panel overhead here, a cloud rather,
Nice.
so a hanging cloud over over the console, because
Hmm.
my control room is just in a little corner. I don't like to have a separate control room. I like to be in the room with the gear, and I'm pretty good at being able to work that way. I've done it for so many years. It's like it doesn't affect how I work sound wise at all.
Nice.
And so I like having, I have a low ceiling over my. Oh, there's a loft up above, so it's got a drop
Hmm.
ceiling because the ceilings in the main studio are like freaking 20 feet high, 15,
Hmm.
20 at the peak. So it's been fun getting it dialed in, and it sounds incredible. And I did an ISO booth that has a drum kit and a grand piano in it, and can be used for vocals as well. And I've got a cloud hanging in there that's a prime
Yeah.
acoustic cloud, and then I've got traps on the bass traps on the corners, and it sounds great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if it was a barn, did you strip it down and rebuild it the way that you wanted, or did you just kind of renovate what was there? And
So
is it a
basically,
major project?
I mean, a major project. It took a long time, but it was not. It was just. It was gutting it. It wasn't tearing it down. So,
Gotcha.
it's basically I used the footprint and the bones, and then it was open on either end with barn stall sliders.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
were, and so that all got enclosed, and there's glass up now. And then we insulated. We did a lot of insulation in the walls, and then and then, like I said, redid all the interior. We extended the loft upstairs, made a little sleeping pad upstairs area, and a little game room lounge upstairs, and then there's a lounge downstairs, and a kitchen area and a bathroom, and so
That's
it
pretty
was all.
sweet.
Yeah, it's great. It's great. It's been really fun. It's a fun place to hang out.
Is it a space where you've got accommodations for artists if they're going to come in and do a? I
You
mean,
could crash, but I tend to not. I mean, I'd rather people not stay with me.
gotcha.
I mean, it's fine if they want to.
Hotel down
Yeah,
the road.
yeah. Well, I mean, just like anybody, I want to have my own. I want to have my life after I get done working, and I feel I'm such an entertainer and accommodator. My family is too, and so it's like if somebody's here, we're just going to we're not going to want to be neglecting them. So it's almost better if it's a relief if I'm happy for people to crash
Sure.
if they want to, but by no means am I saying that it's not allowed, but I like to get done with my work at a civil hour and go up and have dinner with my family and watch a TV show and have some normalcy because my life has been anything but for 30 years. So it's like it's nice to have that at the end of the day. I missed out on that growing up. I missed out on all that because I was on tour, 200 days a year for most of my life, and so. Or working, 12-hour days in the studio, and now I just my hours are, I can get the same amount of work done in half the amount of time.
Nice.
And that's technology as well as just knowing how to do it and knowing what I want.
Sure.
Taking the years to get to that point where you're not second guessing yourself in the studio, you know?
Yeah, but doing what you've done as long as you have, know how to get it right. You know.
I mean, it definitely, that's the upside of getting older and doing it forever is that you can you can apply a lot of things to avoid the trial and error process that with the first half of your life.
Exactly.
Mhm.
I mean, it ties in with the radial stuff that you've been using over the years because we're kind of. I always refer to us as the gear that connects the musician to the music to keep it simple, quiet, efficient piece of gear that connects, get the work done, plug it in, it works, keep going, keep that workflow going, right? Because
Totally.
time is money, right? When
Time is
you're in the
money.
studio. You got a Key Largo and KL8 or keyboard stuff recently. How's
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
How's that
right
working
behind
out for
me.
you?
Oh, that's great. I've got the Key Largo up top here. I also have one in my studio out west. That's why I wanted one here because
Yeah.
I've been getting keyboard crazy here, and it's growing. So I needed to have the inputs, and I like being able to just have everything on all the time, and especially with the workflow of my DAW and the way I work inside of the computer, everything is always live, everything's mic'd up and always on, and that's kind of how I like. That's how I like to work because a lot of times I'm the band on a lot of records I do. Obviously not if it's a band that I'm recording, but if it's like a solo artist and I'm the person making the track and playing all the instruments or at least most of them. And
Yeah.
and that being said, I don't want to have to spend a lot of time. That's why I don't like a separate control room with separate doors and walls, because I want to be able to just walk over. I want to be able to hit record and walk over and grab something, and it's on, and it sounds great, and it's plugged in, and it's recording. And so all the inputs and all the mics are live at all times in
Nice.
here. You just have to be careful with that. And I have it set up in my DAW in my computer. I have it set up where like it doesn't come out the speakers here in the control room and feedback if I crank up the speakers. But when I go into record, everything is live and comes through the speakers. And so when I do that, that's there's a little bit of volume management you have to do to get used to working like that. But having the keyboards all running through, like your Key Largo that Radial makes, it's a sub mixer and it's great because I've got like 3 or 4 keyboards running into it, and I can I haven't gotten it set up out here yet the way I have mine set up in California, which with my studio out there, I've got it where I've actually got my pedal board running through the effects loop on it, on my guitar pedal board, which is kind of fun. So like I can be playing keyboards and I can like turn on distortion, or I can turn on, you know, delays and
Nice way to use
choruses and reverbs and things like that.
Very cool.
And you can add it on each channel on the Key Largo to either or. And it has a foot switch to bypass it, which is kind of nice. And then I run it's just a stereo out, you know, and it's super good quality and quiet. So it's like I run a stereo out and it's always just one set of stereo ins on my DAW that are receiving all the keyboards in the entire studio that way. And that's pretty great. And then I've got this, I got this JX44, which I love. Yeah. Oh, I love it. Because out in my studio in LA, I have the JD7, which is one of the best like Swiss Army knives ever made. And I've always used it. I've always had one. This is sort of a different take on it, and it's sort of the same thing, but it's great. Whereas the JD7, it's like 8 DI boxes basically all built in, and then 2 inputs that are selectable where you can plug straight in, and there's all kinds of, you know, auxiliary outputs and throughput outputs on the back. And I have it all hooked up where literally one cable is going into the front of it, and that's when we're cutting bass or cutting guitars, and it's distributed out through to all the everything. It's distributed out through a rack mount tuner always, so everybody can plug into it and always tune. It's always on for this is the JD7 I'm talking about, and it's got, you know, one channel's going out to my bass chain, and one channel's going out to my UA aux, which, you know, goes into the which I run for my amplifiers and stuff. One's going into a Helix, which is a rack mount modeling guitar thing, and then the other a couple of other ones are going out to actual to all the guitar amp heads that go into actual real cabinets and real microphones. And so it's super versatile, and it's literally just punching switches on the front of it to instant call. So the JX44 that I have back here, this bright yellow thing that you can't miss even if it's not close up, is incredible because it takes it one step further, and I have the guitar running into the front of it, and you can actually have 4 ins and 4 outs. So you can, you know, it's designed for, I know, like live purposes where people have like their multiple guitars going into it and then going out to multiple amps that are all switchable, and that's real cool. But I'm using it in the studio where I'm running into the first input, which the JD7 and the JX44 both have drag control, and which is which is beautiful because, you know, it's great for, you know, it's a buffered input basically, so like you don't lose any signal. If anything, it gives you, I feel like, more definition and more clarity in the guitar when I run through that channel with the drag on it, and then I can set it accordingly. But I do have some guitars with active pickups. And I have some guitars with active pickups, and so I'll run those into one of the other channels, and I'll adjust the drag separately for that so that it doesn't end up overloading the signal, because that's a really hot signal coming in from a battery-powered pickup or an active pickup, right? So, and then, you know, output 1 is going similar to my setup with my JD7 out in LA. Is output 1's going straight into my Helix here, which is for direct, amp modeled recording. And I love using the Helix for all of the effects that are in it. It has great effects. So
it's a great unit.
If I need to get like an instant, just like whatever, like crazy Daniel Lanois, like washy thing that I don't have my, refrigerator rack of H3000s and stuff like that, this covers that. And then and then output 2 goes to the aux, and that's for doing all of my real guitar amps plugged into the aux, but with modeled cabinets, using your real amps. And then I've got the other 2, I've got them running out. Well, it has this awesome thing on the back built in that I already had from Radial that I bought years ago and use them in both studios. Are they're the buffered XLR line driver, the JX.
The SGIs.
SGIs, thank you. So the SGI transmitter and receiver, which what that is in nerd speak is you can plug your guitar into the transmitter side and then run a XLR cable, mic cable, as long as you want, like 100 feet, I
Hmm.
think. And
Yep.
and then it plugs into the receiver box on the other end, and then you plug another mic cable into a microphone,
Hmm.
into the well, I'm sorry, no, that goes
Guitar cable.
into the guitar amp.
Yep.
Yeah, so
Yep.
I can have my guitar amps across the room, but this has that built in. So like
Hmm.
on the back, I've already got two cables running out of the back, transmitter and receiver, and I'm using two of my older SGI transmitter receiver
Yeah.
boxes on the other end of the studio, which is a good impressively 40, 50 feet away. And so I've got those XLRs already run. And anytime I want to just fire up behind the console, but I'm like, oh man, I really want to use my amp, but I'm too lazy to run across the room. And I also don't want to run a 50-foot guitar cable and it sound like shit. So so I run it through that, and it's already going out to the
Yeah, man.
receiver boxes. And there's a transmitter one too, so you can do it from over there as well. Like you could be over at the other end of the studio, and the guitar player could also be standing over there and
Yeah.
plugged into the transmitter box, and it'll go straight routed over here where I can run it to the aux or whatever. I know that's a lot of information, but
It's a great explanation, though. The SGIs are to eliminate signal loss, get signal from point A to point B, instead of running a lot of cable,
yeah,
and then you're messing with signal loss, and you've lost some tone or some character to it.
yeah, and it's just good
The
quality. Yeah.
Thanks, man. The new JX 44 that we've got out now has really come from people like yourself and experts in the field that have said, "Hey, this is a great device, but it'd be great if it had this." So what we've done, we've added all the inputs and all the outputs can be on all the time instead of selecting one at a time
Oh, that's good.
on the front panel, and Jensen transformers in the device like the JD7, and it's got MIDI built in for running MIDI controllers,
Oh, cool.
and also no wall wart, so it's a IEC cable
Oh, that's
for
good.
power. Yeah,
That's
so
good.
it's been kind of revised and fattened up a little bit
That's
for a lot
awesome.
of the people that have said, "Hey, it'd be great," especially for guitar techs that are on tour and they want to actually have four guitars ready to go, packs on, and changing guitars instead of having to actually worry about switching inputs on the fly. Everything can be on,
Sure, sure.
so
No,
that
it's, I
kind of
mean, that's great.
speeds up
Yeah,
speeds up
yeah,
workflow, like you said. Try to get the day done efficiently and speed up the workflow. It just keeps you happy, keeps things flowing, right? So
that's awesome.
hey, hey, I wanted to just switch gears a little bit and touch on something that you just kind of touched on a little bit with regards. We were talking sort of off camera about artists and being busy and stuff. And I gotta say, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time, and your career. I mean, it's so diverse, and the A-list artists that you work with, it's almost like you've taken what you know from your experience and touring and everything, and just brought it into all these different genres and different artists. But you seem to just make them better. And is that just something that you've, I don't know, gotten good at, or is it just an approach that
I,
you take to working with them? Or
oh, I appreciate that. I don't know if, I think it's just from growing up a music nerd and loving all kinds of music. I can honestly say, looking back, I would not have had as fruitful of a music career behind the console, producing and writing or whatever, if I would have been more narrow minded about the kind of music I listened to as a kid. So because then you're playing catch up later down the line. If say 20 years later, or in my case 30 and whatever more later, that there's a style everyone really likes, that reminds that kind of harkens back to say a 70s, whatever. I'll just throw an example out there, but 70s funk or disco or even classic rock sounds like on records from the 70s or 80s, when it went into like new wave and very like technical production and things like that. I think you'd be playing massive catch up if, like, say your only record collection growing up was the Beatles, or your only record collection was
yeah,
AC/DC,
good point.
and
Yeah,
all you cared about was one kind of music. It would limit you with what you would be able to probably get done a lot easier in the studio and a lot more effortlessly by already having that in your DNA, I guess. So I think when it came to my 10,000 hours of learning learning my craft and getting better at recording and better at playing instruments, multi instruments, and all those things. Once those were getting better and easier to achieve, something that sounded good and quality. What you got to figure next is, but can you jump from making a metal record to making a country record and then they not sound the same? So it's like you kind of have to, or let's say you might just be a great, like Rick Rubin is a great example of somebody who I've always loved as a producer, because he's actually not very technical, and I think I'm a lot more technical maybe of a producer than maybe he likes to be, but his isn't about the technicality of it. His is more, he's the fan of music, and he can go from doing a Johnny Cash record to a Dixie Chicks record to a Slayer record. And then, he can do any genre. Tom Petty, he can do any of it, and the records sound believable and honest. And I think that's just due to he's in touch with all things music. And when you're a fan of all kinds of music, I also think from a technical standpoint, in my case, it works better, because if I'm being the band on a lot of it, it helps to just be able to pick up a guitar and go, okay, well, I'm going to do my best David Lindley here and get some slide like on a Jackson Browne record, or I may not be as good as David Lindley, but at least I might get it. I might get it to where they like it and they go like, oh my God, I'm picking up David Lindley vibes. I love that. Nice. And then you're winning in that area if you're doing it. Or I'm like, oh, I'm going to pick it up and I'm going to play a part like on a shred part or something, and I'm gonna, make this.
Which you can though.
I'm gonna channel some Eddie Van Halen on this, and being a massive fan of both of those guitar players. I'm using guitars as an example right now, but just having a little bit of that versatility, I think, and being able to pick up a mandolin and get through a part on it that sounds good for the song, or a bass part that I can channel Donald Duck Dunn, or also channel, nice. Entwistle and or whoever. These are big names I'm using, and I apologize because I'm not the musicians they are. But being a jack of all trades has its perks when you're being a producer. It's like if you can pull all those things off and know how to get to the finish line with the not only the gear, the sound, the technique of the playing, all that, you're just spending less time frustrating an artist by not being able to get there fast enough and get results that are positive and sounding good for them to hear.
Awesome points.
Yeah.
Hey, is that a kind of a reflection of your growing up in Cartersville, Georgia? Like that whole area of Atlanta, Georgia, like such a hotbed for diversity, from kind of the glam rock, like, hip hop. There's so much creativity that's come out of that area. I mean, were you just immersed in it as a kid growing up?
Well, Cartersville in particular, when I was growing up there, was absolutely not versatile and not. It was pretty much whatever was on the radio. So I was a radio baby, but that's not a bad thing. Talking about what we were talking about just a second ago, having like their local radio station in Atlanta, being able to be picked up on FM down the road in Cartersville, which was an hour away, was a big deal, because that was my saving grace. That and MTV. When MTV happened in 1980, I was addicted to it, because I could see the music for the first time. I could see the people, even if they were faking it in the videos. It was just, it put a visual to it. But it also opened my mind up to so many other kinds of music, because when the only station I could pick up was 96 Rock, which was the local rock station, they were a lot more versatile back then than they are now at radio. But it was still one station that I listened to, and so it was like I would hear Highway to Hell, and then I would hear Dream On, and then I would hear. So it was a lot of classic, well, what would be considered classic rock now, but at the time modern, and so. When MTV came along and I started just being a fan of all things music, it would be like, oh shit, there'd be a Boomtown Rats video come on, and then there would be then you would see an AC/DC video, and then you would see it was just all across the board. Human League, Culture Club,
wow.
Wham,
Mhm.
and then the Ramones. And so it was also, it was an education to me when Cartersville was certainly not teaching the School of Rock anytime soon. It was more like the Bible School of Rock, the big rock. That was what they were teaching. So, and I wasn't interested. I was more interested in I knew I wanted to do music for a living, and I wanted to be the guy that I was reading the name of on the credits on the back of an album,
Awesome.
front to back every day on the album cover. And so Atlanta was later though. I lived in Atlanta when I got out of
Mhm.
school and I went to LA for 3 or 4 years, and it's a long story, but record deal, video, big tours, everything, and then basically starting all over again from scratch. Band falls apart, moved back to Atlanta instead of Cartersville this time, and I lived in Atlanta for almost 20 years. So that was
It's a great
really where
city.
yeah, and
Yeah.
that's where in the 90s. So in the 90s is where I really kind of came up in that town from the beginning of the 90s all the way till the early 2000s. That was and yes, at that point, all those references you mentioned, that's when it was just blooming with there was a lot of rock bands, but there was a ton
Mhm.
of hip hop and R&B
Big
coming
time.
out of there. Definitely did not have an influence on me musically as much in the hip hop and R&B world, but the fact that what it was great was the how adventurous that the production was getting in those genres,
Mhm.
as opposed to rock. Rock was starting to get very pretentious and full of itself and boring to listen to, I think. And the people that were making fun, interesting records were definitely hip hop and R&B, and the sounds, it wasn't rock and roll, but it was like it was a lot more interesting, and they were cross collateralizing a lot of influences like soul music and
In a
rock
big
and
way.
funk and yeah, and so and it was fun because I had my own studio in Atlanta after I finally started having some success with it, and I had my own full on commercial facility um,
Nice.
that was that I was running and recording and producing all my bands out of, and my own records as well. And I had I had CeeLo in there and a bunch of other people in there recording at different times because
Yeah.
they all loved rock. Actually, they all loved rock more than rock loved it. Rock didn't love hip hop as much as hip hop loved it. And so they would always come around and they go to the rock shows. And I remember I'd be standing by Andre 3000, at a show in a basement bar for 50 people there
Yeah.
playing rock and roll, and he would just be taking it in, and that was really fun to be able to at least mingle
Very cool.
in that world and know that the only borders up musically and culturally are the ones you put up yourself. You don't
Hmm.
have to, and so I like that they were very curious, to
Awesome.
taking it all in, and that was interesting to me, and that made me feel good about producing records of all genres because I didn't like that people would try to tell you, and A&R guys and
Mhm.
record label people and fans even would be like, oh yeah, no, you're this guy, that's what they always, everybody wants to put you in a box and tell
Mhm.
you that this, you've had success with one thing, and all of a sudden that's all you're allowed to do is whatever that one thing is. And I just think that's bullshit. So I like to
Yeah,
be able to
man.
do my own thing and do and dabble in all of it.
And you've done it really well. I mean, I wanted to ask you a question about your music. To me, has such a message. Like the underlying message is meaningful. Like, are we having a conversation and writing about racism and stepping out of our comfort zones? Is that something you bring to the table for the artists you work with? Because it sounds natural in that space for you to feel that and write about it. Eh, Because especially in today's world, I mean, it's more important than ever that we wake people up and say, hey, we got to be listening, we got to pay attention, we got to be good to each other. And is that something that's always been there for you underneath it all, is speaking from an emotional space that has a message that means something?
I mean, I guess, but more so in my later years and more so apropos for the times because Um, I like to think that I always definitely was, more of a lover, not a fighter. I more of a diplomat, but at the same time
Nice.
knew what I liked and knew what I wanted. But I was raised by decent parents, and they, in the Southern Bible Belt in a rural town, and
Mhm.
you would still see and hear and be a part of sometimes very ugly conversations and bad jokes and
Yeah.
and the fact that we're all works in progress. And I was a different person in my 20s than I am now, for sure. But I like to think it's hopefully for the better, because I would have been complicit to that, because it's all when you come from a town where you have blinders on and all you know is what's around you and what you're exposed to and what you're allowed to be exposed to. And so, I didn't flinch at racist jokes or, or, homosexual jokes or, that anything
Mhm.
like that that would come off color or bigoted or whatever. Um, in normal conversation, it was completely normalized growing up like that in the 70s and the 80s in the rural South,
Sure.
and more not just the South but everywhere. So I think the record you're referencing, this last one I did,
Yeah.
is very much a take. It's a take on my childhood and growing up with that in my trajectory, and how I grew out of it. and
Wow.
and how there was definitely people in my life and people every day that I knew that were completely okay with or in on it, whether it was you know racism or bigotry or whatever, just hatefulness and closed-mindedness, and it all comes from fear, fear of not knowing. And you'd
Mhm.
always do that. Like I just remember in school, growing up where white people hung out with white people and black people hung out with black people, and they didn't merge ever. So when I did have like a one friend that was that was black that would want to talk to me or I'd want to talk to them, there would be no wall, and it would always be better. Like it would always be
S-
more like interesting and more fun to talk to, because you felt like you were exploring something that was new to you. And that's sad that's the case. But most of the people that were too scared to do that just basically, flew their rebel flags. And and on the other end as well, like on the other side, where there, sadly, a lot of black people didn't want to talk to a lot of white people because they didn't trust them, because history proves that,
Yeah.
the white race was not very nice to black
Yeah, man.
culture. And so I think making a record about it to shine a light on it was very important to myself, as getting some closure. And also, ironically, I'd written it and recorded it 2 years before I put it out. 2 years before this past crazy year we had in 2020.
Sure.
So when I finally decided to put it out, I put it out like sadly, the material did not, the lyrics and the subject matter did not date itself in two
Yeah.
years. It was more prevalent, more prevalent than ever. And so I put it out, and like a month later after putting it out, the George Floyd thing happened, and it just, that was one out of millions of incidents that just was the tipping point and just tilted the scale. And um and so it was very polarizing, and it's very polarizing also
It
and
is, man.
sobering to put something like that out and see just how many people are not okay with you putting that out and are like actually pissed off at you for it. And it's like, what does
Wow,
that
man.
tell me about you? It's like
Yeah.
that tells me all I need to know about that person. And
Hmm.
at that point, I'm like, man, I don't care if I lost half of my fan base. If they're shitty people, then I don't care. I want them
Right.
gone. And it was very, very revealing. It was like, it was like tons of people that were just like, Just,
Wow.
this sucks. And it's like, oh, it sucks because it's making you uncomfortable, maybe because maybe it's calling you out. And,
Yeah, man.
and by the way, it was calling myself out, the whole record, So it's not like I was pointing a finger at one particular person, except myself. So
I totally get that.
really interesting to see how uncomfortable it made people. But I was also pleasantly surprised at how many new fans and how many people were super excited that I did it and relieved that I did it and thought it was like some sort of bold move to put it out. And it's like, I didn't put it out for 2 years because I was too scared to put it out.
Wow. Thanks for sharing that. Because I remember first hearing Gridlock, and I've always kept an eye and an ear on your stuff, and also with the artists that you've worked with, and not only because our relationship with Radial and whatnot, but the multi-talent. It's all there, like you said earlier before. When we were off camera, it's kind of, you're the band, you're the voice, you're that bridge for artists to get to where they're going, and by saying things that maybe are to the point and from the heart, that mean something and need to be said. We need more of that, especially in a world that we're in today, because we've been kind of cut open in
Oh
a
yeah,
lot of
the
ways,
wound
and
is very,
the
very fresh.
wound is open, bro.
Yeah.
And it's, I hear it in the work that you do. Certainly the diversity in the work that you do, from Keith Urban and all the others, Panic and Fall Out Boy. The list is long, but your stamp seems to be everywhere. And keep saying and doing what you're doing, man. Because walking in with the video for Are We Having a Conversation? Was that done at the studio in LA? Uh, or was
Well,
that
let's see.
done?
Was it what were you talking? We did a long form video for the entire. There was a music video for the entire album, which was sort of like a visualizer where it was just like scenarios with characters, and then I
Yeah,
did a live performance in the studio of the record all the way through, which was me doing the record one man band style with a drum machine
that's
and a
right.
guitar. So if that's
Yeah,
the one you're talking about, yeah, I did that. I just did that in one pass,
in one
with
take,
being
sort of thing.
filmed by like these 3D cameras and these
Gotcha.
virtual reality VR 360 cameras,
Hmm.
and yeah, we just and I ran it direct through my setup and just recorded it live, and that was fun to do because there was no touring last year, obviously, and that was one thing I was kind of concerned with that record in particular is I didn't know how I was going to tour on it because
No kidding.
it was very dense subject matter and uncomfortable subject matter, and I didn't want to have to answer a lot of questions in between songs. I didn't want to have to I didn't want to have people like looking at me funny when I'm saying really strange, from a first person's perspective, sung by a protagonist saying some very terrible shit. So that was the other thing too. Is I thought being it was technically a rock opera, is what you call those albums that are a story concept album all the way through. And how do you go tour on that where you don't play the whole fucking thing? Like you want to play the whole thing all the way through, right? So you don't want to just like play one song here and one song there off of it because if the people would take it out of context and they might be like, "What the hell did he just say?" Because lyrically, and also I get it that a lot of people want to come see me that have been coming see me play for 20 something years probably, and I've got a lot of albums and they want to hear songs that they've been hearing off of albums for a long
Yeah.
time. So the pandemic definitely took care of that. It took care of those concerns for me, and so we just did a one shot live recording of the record video and then put it online for people to see.
Nice. I really enjoyed it. I thought it
Oh,
was
good.
it was really well done, and
Thanks.
playing the different instruments, and just a great piece of work. And thanks for
Thanks.
sharing that, because especially today, we need more music that means something,
I
that
appreciate it.
speaks to what we need to be listening to and acting on. Wakes
Agreed.
people up,
Agreed.
right? So in having said that, I want to thank you for joining us today, man. It means a lot. Your support, it's awesome, and
Glad to do it. I appreciate it.
always here to help you, man. Whatever you need, whenever you need it in California and the new studio in Nashville.
I'm
Just
off and running thanks to
always,
you guys.
always. Thank you, man. So having said that, all the best to you and your wife and family, and hopefully everybody's safe and sound, and good to see you back from a well-deserved vacation that you finally got to take.
Very,
Which you
very
needed,
much needed.
right? So just to wrap, if anybody wants to get in touch with Butch, butchwalker.com, right?
That's that's the website. And
Yeah,
then,
and at Butch Walker
on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. Yeah.
Yeah. And anybody that's interested, please reach out to Butch. And thanks for joining us. If you like what we're doing here, hit subscribe and notification bell for the next one that we're doing. And Butch, thanks very much for the time and all that. And I
Thanks
know you
for
got a
having me,
session.
man.
I know you got a session to get to. So appreciate your time here, and keep on keeping on. We'll see you guys when we see you. Thanks for tuning in.